Okay, I guess we're ready now. Now we have had the consultant and the owner's view on IPD, and now I'm happy to present Hans Blinkilde and Janni Tjell, who will tell us about how they the contractor's view on partnering an IPD, as they represent NCC, Nordic Construction Company. So it's a joint Danish and Swedish presentation here. And they've been working with partnering for almost 15 years now. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for letting me talk about our experiences. Let's go to right click. Let's see if the technique works. Yes. As it was said, I've been working 15 years with partnering, the partnering concept, the partnering mindset. I've been doing very many things concerning partnering, setting up educations, assisting on projects, supporting workshops, writing tenders, whatever. I've been in charge of NCC's partnering strategy in the whole group for around 10 years. I left that task a few years ago when I wanted to have some other challenges after so many years. So I have a very broad experience in this field. I will use the word partnering in general. I will come back to that. There's many kind of concepts, and my point of view is that they are very much alike in many senses. But I will have a few words on that also. Sorry. Could you hear me? Yeah. Anyway, I speak so loud, so it's too loud now. You're recording. Yeah. Fine. Okay. Thanks. Okay. I've just taken a photo I like very much here. It was taken back in 2003, where we had this school project in a partnering setup. It was a very great success. We had a very satisfied client, and the consultants, they were also very happy, even the architect. And we as contractor, we also earned well and made a good quality. But the project in itself was even more interesting when in the tender there were 4 existing schools which should be refurbished and 1 new school to be built. And it was in 1 tender actually. So after tendering and selecting the winning team, we and our consultants together with the client built it up together, the whole project, including a target price, and managed to construct it within the budget. And having several projects within 1 economy and 1 tender saved some costs, but also created some flexibility, because we could during the time see that some of the existing schools needed a little more than expected, and others where we could make some savings. So it was a very flexible way, but there were a total amount we should be within the whole way through, and we succeeded in that. Another thing with the picture here is that all the people here you see, it's the mayor and it's the pupils, it's teachers, it's contractors, subcontractors, workmen, architects, engineers, and many other parties. They have actually, and that's important issue, I think, some knowledge and some competence we could use in a positive way in a project, and we did that here. And I can also say that we here in Denmark, NCC, but we can't win them all, so there are, of course, other projects I don't know about. We have, during those 15 years, carried out more than 200 partnering projects. And in the whole Scandinavia, maybe Janni will come back to that. We have even more, especially in Sweden, partnering, and this way of working has been a great success. And then I have 10 slides about partnering. No, about NCC. No, I have one just for you who doesn't know NCC, but we are one of the largest contractors in Scandinavia, always competing with Skanska. Some years they are bigger than we are, and others years we are the biggest. We have a turnover of 18 billion Swedish kroner, 58 billion and 80,000 employees approximately. And we have no international department. So we have decided some years back to concentrate around the countries around the Baltic Sea. Being a contractor and being in construction business is a rough environment in many senses. And typically it's about some tough contracts. Many of, if not all, the parties, they are selected on lowest price. How can we then expect to have a good or great cooperation afterwards? Typically, we can't. So partnering is very much about thinking differently, working with trust. But that's also risky. Think about the cat. So the whole setup we have offered is to have some very clear processes about in what order should we bring in the different competences, in what kind of payment should we have, what kind of agreement should there be, what about bonus systems and so forth. That's very important if you shall keep up the trust, and that's important during the whole phase. Sometimes we see projects fail where you in beginning use a lot of efforts having a good atmosphere, and afterwards, if you're not really still continuously working hard on keeping up the trust, then you might fail. And it's not only trust in between the contractor and the client, it's trust in the whole project group, in between the persons, but also in between companies. You know this pendulum? I'll just talk a little about how we have experienced the market during those years I've been working with partnering, and I think I was one of the first starting really to pick up learnings from both United States, but especially from England. And when I try to compare here, it's not so that when the pendulum is up to the right, mostly up to the right, it's more than 50% or the opposite. It's not so. It's more a trend, you could say, when during those 15 years has partnering been more successful or more accepted, more used in the Danish market than in other periods. And I will also try to explain why it was, as I see it, turning out. This is not based on statistics. I don't think you could find statistics on it, but my experience during all those years. You could say in the end of this thousands, it was neutral somehow. Some test projects started up within the Ministry of Housing, and I would say with some quite good success. Then somehow it became very positive working with partnering, and there was massive support from the government side, and many activities started up, and somehow it forced the pendulum up in the more positive side. But then we had a very bad project, very well known here in Denmark. It was the Danish radio project coming up with an over budget in 1.8 billion Danish kroner, which was very big out of the total budget. And actually, you could discuss whether it was a full partnering or not, but it was mentioned as partnering, and it also had some many good thoughts. But afterwards, there were made a report by some independent parties, and they could see that partnering had only a smaller part of those problems. But what did people have in their mind? That was partnering. So that was the cause of the failure. So what happened? The pendulum went up here to the traditional old way, where we as contractor give a price based on a very detailed project, and where we are only winning the project if we give the lowest price. And how can we earn money? By extra bills afterwards. So that's the conflict. And for instance, the Danish hospital program, there's some massive investments in Danish hospitals for the moment. You could discuss the figures, but let's say 50 to 60 billion Danish kroner will be invested in a number of hospitals. And they are all somehow tendered by the traditional one, where we as contractor will be brought in late. And we have seen the first results there already. Problems, a lot of problems, I would say. So for that reason, I think now we have seen the trend going back again. Maybe this is just due to gravity. So the pendulum, when it's up, it must go down again. You could think about that, but it could also be due to the market situation. It could be due to some bad projects, whatever. There might be many reasons, but I think we have a trend now, and we also see that on some of the hospital projects, that somehow it goes for more including cooperation. But who knows? Who knows? We will see. I just mentioned there's many names. I just put some of them. The top here, it's Danish names, and there are others I could also say, and some of the English names. And I would say, looking into it, it's very much about the same. And I think it's not an interesting discussion about definitions when all the projects we have done, more than 200 just in Denmark, they are different. So you could come with all the theories, all the concept, all the processes, because every project, every contract, every client is different by the other. So there is a bigger variation in the projects than in the concepts, my opinion. Also talking about how can you make success on doing partnering. First of all, I think it's very important how the society looks on this. Is it legal? Tendering rules, I think about. Or are you somehow pushing on it? This is an important issue to consider. How to decrease waste, how to make better projects. If you push a little, then the other parties might be more interested. Looking at the company, it's very important that the top management in a company supports this idea of working. Because if it's just up to the project in itself without support from the management, you will not succeed. Then you have to work very hard on the processes. You really need to have a strategy and idea for the whole way through the project. And you need to have the same picture between all parties. I can have my own idea about the process, but if the architect has another idea or the client has a third idea, it doesn't work. So you need to have that systemized. And then it's also up to the persons. On many jobs we have made personal tests about how are you as a person. Will you fit together? Can you work together? And we will had discussions about what are your strengths and weaknesses? How can you cooperate with the other profiles in the group? And this is not just a thing we as a contractor should live up to. This is something everybody should be aware. This is somehow a very detailed process. And the main idea as I see it, but there are other things, is to involve parties earlier than normal. The next step in the value chain has important knowledge and competence which could improve the project. So you bring in the contractor, the main contractor, before you have finalized the project. You even take some subcontractors on critical areas to bring their knowledge in, suppliers as well. When we have ended the project and starting the planning of the site, you need to bring in some workmen because they have also important knowledge we can use for all parties' benefit. And to make it more easy, we have just, but you could use other phases, but we have always talked about those 4 phases, as you can see here. Then looking into phase 1, I've just taken some photos from real world. Here we delivered the tender. Here we signed the contract. Here we have the client talking about his dreams and project. Here we have some project discussions and some group discussions and some workshops. And we signed a declaration in the end of phase 2, and we had a happy group having somehow the same goals to go for. Same framework, same idea about the whole project. We don't have that normally. Going to phase 2, also some pictures. Yeah, you can see by yourself. We took the first step in the project. We are going more detailed into how to organize it. We bring in the foreman. have a lot of important discussions, new workshops, prioritizing all the inputs, making declarations, and the output here is that we have a very motivated workforce and a well-organized site where the input we have from the workmen themselves is included. And those pictures you just saw there, the last ones, was a result of a very hard work we had, where we also together with the trade union, Gunde, NCC, had a good cooperation about something we call trust-based lean. Another concept name, you could say, but more over in the lean construction part, but very involving with the workmen and foremen. And in the end, we received the cake. Godt gået, it says. Good job. We have in NCC, we are certified by all the ISO standards necessary, and partnering and the lean is included in all our processes. So our project managers, they can actually take out descriptions of everything which can support the project. But as I said earlier, every project is unique. So it's not standardized in the sense that you should follow, because we also need to be flexible there. What is the potential, what kind of project, what is the client's needs, and so on. But this is a work package which can be supportive to the project managers. And then looking into how many reports has been made during those years, and maybe I didn't get them all, about partnering. Tons of papers describing both potentials and barriers, but in many senses being supportive to partnering and this mindset. And I don't know if clients can't read or they don't understand, but there is a lot of documentation about the result here. My question to you could be to consider, have we been clever and good to explain those advantages? I don't think so. And I know many reports from abroad, and then I could have more slides on this topic. A new survey was just made recently. This is about how can you achieve higher productivity within refurbishment. And people out from the branch in general were asked, around 300 people by independent consultancy. And very interesting, when they should come up with their suggestions where to find the highest potential for increased productivity is process optimization still. So that looks good for the future. But maybe we haven't succeeded fully. We have talked about it in 15 years at least. Then on some of this is based on a few projects where we have worked with this trust-based lean. We have seen increased job satisfaction. We measure actually on that. Faster construction time, less waste. Salaries for the workmen actually rose positively. And we were also anchoring somehow of the knowledge which can be used on new projects. If I should in general compare to the experience we have with partnering project, I can add that we have in general had a higher customer satisfaction. We have had lowered our risk, and for that reason, in average, we have earned more than usually. But it's not so job by job we actually take more money. But it is somehow also a risk discussion where when you sit together, you can eliminate risk during the first phases. And is this important to the client? I would say yes, but maybe we can have a discussion about that also. So I would say thank you. I hope that gave you some inspiration, and you're welcome to call me if you have questions or new ideas or jobs to do around the Baltic Sea. And to be sure that you don't forget me, you will also have the photos here on the slides. So thank you very much. And then I will give the word to Janni, Tjell. Yeah.
I thought we were going to take questions first.
No, we will. No, you will have your. That was. And then we take the questions together afterwards. But my colleague Janni is also from NCC, but employed in NCC in Sweden, in Gothenburg. So, but you can explain by yourself. So.
Can I take that one too? Yeah, thanks. Is my presentation on now?
Yeah, it's already.
But smart. Okay. Yeah. Hey, I know a lot of you, and and I already introduced myself a little bit last night for those of you that were there, but I will try to do it short here today as well. And as I was introduced here, my name is Janni, and I am from Denmark. And when I did my thesis back in 2009, my master thesis, I did them at UC Berkeley. And I actually worked with the project that David, he introduced here today. So I worked with all these guys that we saw in this video, and I was engaged in that project for 2 years. And I was also involved in another hospital project in California during that time. And I was basically sitting on the lab of Glenn Ballard and Iris T. Tomlins for these 2 years at UC Berkeley too. So I got all the inspiration that this world could provide, I would say. So I am heavily pleased with this situation, and also standing here today, coming after a presentation of David. I mean, he has explained everything that IPD is about, which is perfect for me. So I will basically take my presentation from there, because obviously we have had and faced other problems and issues here in Scandinavia than what they have in the US. And then when I finished my thesis, life took me to Sweden, and then I started working for NCC Sweden, and I worked there for 2 years. And it was during these 2 years that I started implementing what we in NCC call NCC Project Studio, which in English would be a big room. And this is what this presentation will be about. And then after 2 years, I got a little impatient because I think it wasn't really going that fast with the implementation. So I started to do an industrial PhD. So right now I'm actually also involved at the Technical University in Gothenburg. And there I'm also teaching a lean course, which is the only lean course given in Scandinavia. So, and I'm doing that in cooperation with Alan Mossman, who's sitting here in the first row too. So yeah, this is a little bit about me, and what I will be talking about, as I said, is what are the challenges when you come with all this knowledge that we have been given here today about what IPD is, about what Annette talked about, that we might not have the right tendering. I mean, we are not really there with IFOA or all these nice way of contracting. We have a lot of traditional contracting. So we have a lot of challenges in front of us. And yeah, so don't take this as a fixed thing. We are on a journey on developing this. We are on a journey about how can we actually take all these brilliant thoughts and then how can we put them into a Scandinavian context? How can we put them into the scale of projects that we have here? Because remember, when I came back in 2011, I sat with all these thoughts and I was put in a Swedish context. And how do you take all these thoughts and then what do you do to them here? So yeah, this is that is the takeoff point. And this is not working. So I will be going through why we wanted change, what was it that we saw, why did we want to go this way. And then I will introduce the concept NCC Project Studio and give you some of the experiences that we have had. And one thing before I continue, I'm working with Jonas, who is sitting there, so the questions afterwards can be directed both to me and to Jonas. Not that I don't want to answer them. But when I came, we saw many of the problems that we probably all see. We have not the best way of engaging our owners. We have heard that today. We might not so good when we're doing our design. What is it that the production need? So these were some of the challenges that we saw, and we saw that we were making the same problems over and over again, and we kind of just accepted the state that we were doing these mistakes instead of actually facing them and doing something about them. So the problems that we saw was that we needed to connect the owner and the design team better, and we needed to have more focus on the owner's needs. We needed to get them engaged and tell us what is it that they want, and we needed also now, who was it who made that McLearmy curve, showing that we are making decisions too early and progressing before we actually have the information that we need in order to progress. So we're making decisions on too unsolid basis. And then in our process, we have way too many handsovers because the process are often divided up in pre-design, design, detailed design, and then we go into construction. And between these phases, we have different teams. And how do we handle all that information? Because we actually lose a lot of information. And then we had limited knowledge sharing, both in between projects, but also within projects. So these, I'm not saying that these are the only targets that we shall address, but these were the ones that we at NCC Sweden decided to address with this new concept where we wanted to improve the design. Another reason was actually also that even before Larry Koskela in 1992 made his first article that kind of introduced the whole lean construction concept, he based that report on some reports from Sweden actually that told that up to like 56% of these problems that we are encountering in production, they are caused in design. So we have many reasons to addressing and doing something about this whole issue. And this, can I point with this one? Yeah. So when I came to Sweden, I tried to depict the process that we were having, how we were going through a programming phase, and then a pre-designing, a design, a detailed designing, and then how we were going in the production. And these red marks here, they are documenting when we were making decisions of when to progress in the design. Now, I didn't make in the McLearmy curve, but it's actually never before that you get into the detailed design that you engage all your subcontractors and the consultants that are helping with making the documentation from their side. So we were actually making decision on progressing in our projects before we had all the knowledge on board, which is not so good. And we had different teams along the process, and we had no information overlap, and we had no backflow of information. So basically what we did was that we started to implement this way of co-locating the design team here in this phase, Because traditionally a design team was, I've maybe forgot to say that, but the projects that we were looking at here first are a lot smaller than the ones that David he introduced. We don't have that many projects of that size, $1 billion projects. They don't come so often here in Scandinavia. I mean, the bulk of projects that we have, they are less than 5 million, and then we have some that are a little larger than that. And those projects that we targeted here, they were the projects between 100 million and 400 million Swedish kroners, which is about $60 million. So this is the types of projects that we were applying this model, this design model on, so what is common for this type of project is that they are gathered in a traditional setting. They are gathered for a projekteringsmøde, design meeting, once a week for a few hours, and then they would go separately and work in their home offices. So what we did instead was that we wanted to co-locate them that one day during the week. So we wanted to give them the opportunity to sit and work together and elaborate on the projects and solve all the problems that they have, instead of just coming to these project meetings and just checking off and blaming each other, but making an environment where we could discuss openly, where we could have informal and formal communication to solve all these problems that we have in a project. So this was the process, and where we now are using NCC Project Studio is here in the design and in the detailed design. So what is it? The Project Studio is that's a new way of collaborating that enables a new way of communicating. Because all the different actors, they are there. We are both having the owners and the production with us in the design, so that we both know what the owner wants and what we are producing in the design. And we have more informal and formal communication, and we are physically gathering them, and we use visual management, which for us is a way of, you saw that in the video from Cathedral Hill, how they had all the things on the walls, how they were constantly communicating with each other, anchoring what is it that we are doing. I mean, it's a little what we're doing with the BIM model too, that we are anchoring all the things that we're doing so that we know that we're talking about the same things. And that's what we're trying to do with the visual management too. We want all the members in the design team to be on the same page all the time. And that we anchor with visual management. And then it's a new way of thinking. It's definitely a new way of thinking, and we are working very hard on that, because that's not something that we are doing overnight. Go closer to the microphone. Okay, I will do. And these principles that we all know from Leiker's book that introduces the 14 principles here, we are trying to work with all of these, trying to give them the both how, like in NCC we are particularly working with this. Oh, it's not working. Like, I mean, this is NCC who is working with that, and then when we're in the projects, we are working more with the tools, and in the project studio, we are particularly working with this visual control, with the visual management. But for the whole team to work, we need to work with all of them, because we need to have a team that's able to solve problems. So we are working with all of these aspects. So the project studio, which I said in English it would be the big room, but we have developed our own name, which is NCC Project Studio. And that consists of that we are co-locating the team, and that we are working with operation. That's our way of working. And then we work with the VDC, with the BIM models. So these are the three components that we have, that we work with. And the prospects obviously are that we believe that we create the right communication at the right time, so that we solve the problems before that they even become problems. We believe that that's the right way of doing it, and that we're stimulating the communication between the client and the design team, so that the client knows what's going on in the design, because then they can be better in actually making their wishes, if they know what's going on. They get more involved. And then we have enough knowledge to make our decisions because we have everybody on board earlier. We have everybody there before we take the decision of continuing in our project. We have a lot fewer handovers. And then because we are working in these teams, and some of these teams are continuing to the next project, we have a lot more handovers of knowledge from project to project, so we are not reinventing the wheel in each project. So these are some of the prospects of the NCC Project Studio. But to be considered before you do this, some of the challenges that we have had is that when we do this, we need to have the physical locations, because it takes up room, it takes up space when we have to take in all our consultants, and how do we do that? I cannot say that we really have solved that. So far we are often sitting in conference room, because first we had to show that this concept works, but we are working on that. But that's a limitation, that's something that you have to consider before you start. But on the other hand, I don't think it should let anyone stop, because you can do it if you have the right spirit, and if you have people on board that want it, then it's not that it's the limitations. And then the highest priority is that you have the people on board that are important for the project, that they know that they shall be there. So yeah. And then this is a little picture about where we have all these project studios now here in Scandinavia. It started in Sweden, and then it grew from there. And now we have projects in Norway and in Finland and in Denmark. And we have more than 50 projects that have been finished in the design, and they are now in production. And we have, I actually don't know how many we have on the go right now, because it's just growing, and the projects can start if they want to start an NCC project studio. So I'm not necessarily, or Jonas are engaged in all of them. So it's just taking off actually right now. And project studios are being built, and a little interesting aspect is actually that some of our subcontractors, when they have been working with us with this concept, they like it so much that they have actually sometimes invited NCC to their location, because they thought that they physically could facilitate our way of working better than what we actually could ourselves. And they wanted to work with NCC with this method. So I think that's really good that our subcontractors, they are so interested in our way of working that they start to offer facilitation of it. But obviously we have to work. That's one of our biggest challenges right now. That is actually the physical facilitation, which is a bit sad. But that's how it is. If you're interested, I can tell that NCC here in Denmark actually kicked it off with 2 project studios, both here in Copenhagen and in Aarhus. And I'm just so envious, actually. But what can you do about it? It's just good that it's kicking off. What have we accomplished? Because as we talked about also last night, we always want to measure. We want to show that we have accomplished something. And so what is it? What can we show? What can we give? What can we tell when we want to sell this concept so that more projects want to use it? One thing that we can say is that we have more throughout worked documentation when our design is done. So we have encountered more problems, so that there are so many of those when we go into construction. So that would be higher quality of the production of the product that we make in the design. So that's good. We have lowered the take time. In this sense, the take time is that usually when you are in a conventional design, if a problem was encountered in one of these design meetings, then a consultant would be given the task to figure out what is the problem till the next meeting the week after, and then maybe come back and say, well, it wasn't really my case, it wasn't my fault, kind of. And then another consultant would go home with the same issue and come back 2 weeks after, and then from the time a problem was encountered till like it was actually fully taken care of, it could take up to 6 to 8 weeks. That's a normal time frame actually before you found a problem, so that you actually solved it And during that time, you were making a lot of design up towards these things that were actually wrong. So there you also get problems when you change the thing and you don't see all the other things that have been made according to that. And now when we have this design studio here and all the consultants are involved, they can solve these type of problems for like 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, because we have everybody on board, everybody understands the problem, and everybody can see, okay, this is actually a problem, and it's not difficult to solve. We just do like this, and then we have a problem, and then we don't get all the other problems. So that's the take time that we had lowered dramatically. And then we have that's really hard to measure this with the email correspondence, but we have some tools that have given us the ability to say that people shall not send each other emails, they shall come with the questions during those days where we are co-located. So this is just by questionnaire, we have asked the people, okay, how do you feel? Do you think that we have lowered the email correspondence? And the general answer is that we have lowered it, and some think that they have lowered it with more than 80%, because they don't think that they actually have emails any longer specifically to the project, but more to like administrative things. And then problems that usually not would have been identified, those that we identify now due to the informal communication, we see problems before they become problems. So these are some of the things that we have done, how to implement all these thoughts into a Scandinavian context with the challenges and that it all gives. Jonas, do you want to come over? Do you want to sit there? Okay.
Thank you very much. And I saw at the audience that there were several times where there was heads nodding and heads doing the other thing. What do you call that in English? Shaking? Yeah, that's the word. So I guess there are a lot of comments out there. So the word is free. Anybody who's willing to start? Alan?
Hans, this one's for you. You talked, I'm not sure about my pronunciation here, about the Baker's Garden School? That's fine, okay. Yeah, I think you probably do it better than I can. And that was back in 2003, and it was a 4-school framework. Can you talk to us about how the design process was managed on that framework?
Quite a long time ago, but yeah. Ah, it works here? Okay.
If you push the button.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I was pretty close to that project, so but of course maybe the developments we have made afterwards has been improved, so I might mix a little up, but in general how we do it is like I try to show on the pictures. In the design phase we usually, after signing the contract, being selected and so on, we put the steering group and the project group together for a workshop. It could be at least one day, but better for 2 days, where we start up the cooperation, you could say, where we define success criteria for the client. We discuss common goals. We discuss how to carry out this project. What is the needs, you could say, the client wishes. Sometimes end users will be involved in such a workshop also. Not all of them, of course, but a few. And then we will start to discuss how to organize the design process more in detail. Sometimes we will succeed to do that during this workshop. Afterwards, it's planned by the end of the workshop how to continue that process. Often there will be, we will have a rough idea about the cost for such a project. There might be some very initial drawings, there might not, but there will be a description of the needs, how many approximately square meters and other things, the functionality and so on. And out from that, together with the designers, the architect and engineers, and our people, not ordinary contractors, you could say, but people used to work in design and build contracts, will, together with the client group, start up on the design process, and will also consciously make calculations and having quite clear ideas about the time schedule and things like that included in the design process. Somehow like we do nowadays in VDC, but at that time we didn't have it, but so we have now a better tool even to do it. But as I often say, talking about VDC does nothing by itself. VDC is somehow just a place where you put in all the information and decisions made by men and women. Sorry.
Thank you for that. And my understanding from the process slide that you put up.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. And my understanding from the process slide that you showed during a talk was that phase one ends with the target cost.
Yeah.
You've got the design,
Yeah.
and now you've got the
Yeah.
target cost.
Yeah.
That seems to me to be the fundamental difference between what you're calling partnering and saying is the same as IPD, and IPD, where with the target value design process, you start with the target cost and then you begin design. And turning
I understand
that
the question.
difference is very, very important.
Yeah, but I've tried both things. I would say sometimes we don't at that time call it the target price because we create the target price, but then we have the budget price, you could say, from the client, but that's a detail. Other times we don't have it, we only have a program with all the needs described in details, and then we somehow, by, you could say, our experiences and rough calculations and so on, we start to have an idea about the price, but constantly in that phase we discuss price, compared with the traditional way where you could say at least the contractor's experience about how much it actually costs is brought in on a very late stage after a tender based typically on a detailed design project.
Any other comments? Questions? Stig?
Yes, thanks very much, Hans and Janni, for these contributions about IPD, alliancing, partnering, whatsoever. Talking about integration in the construction process is obviously the crucial thing of today's agenda. So this is what you are telling us is also about integration, and what do we actually mean by integration? I know, as far as I know, both of you are ethnic Danes, but it seems to me like you have in some way been infected by Swedish, not disease maybe, but system thinking, where we have a strong contractor keeping the upper hand in the design processes. Developing the NCC project office, project room, project studio is also can also be considered in that perspective. So my question is, do this guarantee a fair integration of the actors, that they're put together in the premises of the NCC location, and how do you actually manage the design process when it comes to the end of the day, where lots of different point of views have been presented by the actors?
We are, and you're right, and it's not a Swedish disease, but it's our way of working. We are main contractors. Our business is somehow also to deliver the individual trades. We have an in-house worksmen ourselves. Approximately half of our employees are in-house people, and they are also involved. But as I typically say, we must decide if the house should be made out of bricks or wood before we invite the carpenter. So, and I will not say, that would be a lie, that we always manage to invite all the relevant subcontractors, but the idea and what we have also done on several occasions is to define what critical traits there will be in the different projects, and it might vary from one project to another. But it could be the concrete work, very, very complicated. Then you need to have those competences in. It might be the technical traits. Then you need to have those traits earlier involved. But you don't need maybe to involve everybody, because that's also still the rough environment on the tough sea, as you saw. It is still pretty old-fashioned branch we are working in, and with a lot of traditional purchasing, and yeah, I think that was the honest answer.
I don't know if I have so much to add to that. I don't know if it's a Swedish disease either. I also think that the contracting is a huge for us to take the next step. I mean, how do you make, as Annette say, how can you make contractors and consultants collaborate if they have contracts that are giving the incentives to the opposite? So I don't think it has anything to do with Sweden or Denmark or anything. I think there are many more things to it. And then, how do you facilitate in this here case with the NCC project studio, how we make the consultants collaborate? We have tried to take in some of the visual planning tools from the last planner, among more, and taking those into the design so that we make all the consultants come with their own agendas, and then we try to combine them in the design so that they all have their own way of working. We are only physically facilitating it. So in that perspective, I don't think that there is anything in contradiction to collaborating.
Please don't take the disease term with you back home. Actually, I wanted to put it in brackets because we have to respect the Swedish for being much more efficient than the Danish in many situations. But am I right when I say that it is important to have somebody in charge of the solution or the decision making in the NCC project studio, and this somebody would typically be NCC?
Yeah, we have I am talking out from the NCC project studio perspective now, and then Hans can take another perspective. Yeah, we have a project manager who is leading the project through the design process, but we have actually made it so that the subcontractors among themselves can make decisions that are not depending on what NCC wants. But obviously, it becomes a cooperation. people work together. So I don't think that NCC is this in charge in that way that you kind of want it to be, that we decide whatever is going to be made. I think that the consultants among themselves are doing that, and then we try to facilitate it.
So are you on your way from deconflicting, I think David called us this morning, towards synergy? Would be your answer?
That would be my answer, yeah. Because when we, for example, how we're doing our protocols now, it's not about conflicting and blaming, it's just checking off that we are on the same path. So yeah, we're not having those meetings of conflicts anymore. We are having more, how do we solve, people have the same target, people want to go in the same direction, people want a project to be a good project. So it is more like that, actually.
I can add that it is our core competence somehow to organize and coordinate. But I've also seen projects where we have actually given that task to the architect or to the engineer if they had better competences within this field. But of course, and then our role would maybe more be a traditional contractor's role as having control of the planning phase and how to organize the site and how to calculate the project time schedule and so forth. But in the most cases we are involved also in, and I think that's the whole clue actually. In discussing very much about every design detail in the project.
Can I make one more comment? I've just written an article actually about how these teams that we're working with, they are becoming more self-going. So even if we have the absence of a project manager for a while, the projects are actually able to be self-going and make decisions without the presence of a project manager. And they have the authority to do that too. So that is one of the benefits of having such a team, because before the project manager was more the spider in the web controlling all the subcontractors, and all information would have to go through that through the project manager, where now that is not how it's done, basically. So the next challenge that we have is, okay, so how do we then make sure that even though the design team is self-going, how are they going in the right direction? I mean, if the owner wants a blue house, then they make a red house, then it's not so good. So we need to get that more into it. So that is one of our challenges, exactly, to incorporate the owner's wishes in a better way so that we produce what the owner wants. So that's the challenge that we are, where we are right now.
Yep, let that be the final comment on that. Michael, do you have something?
I think what Sten is touching upon in a very indirect manner is the challenge we have in maybe within these type of projects to ensure that we have the same level of architectural quality in some of our projects. I think it's a real concern, and I don't know how many architects there are here today. They are probably not the majority. In LCI DK, we have difficulties in reaching out to the architects, and I also know from my own professional life that when we are well, for example, right now I'm in a project where we wanted to have some early involvement from the contractor, and for several reasons we decided to have not as early involvement of the contractor, and the architects were very they were arguing to postpone it as much as possible because they feel constrained when they are put under sort of the regime of the contractor. And when we see these TVD charts where we see the costs are lowered, we say that we put in value-added stuff, but it's very difficult to make a similar chart that shows the increase in architectural quality. I think it's a major concern if we want to reach out to the whole of the industry. So that's it. I don't know if you have any comment on that.
I agree. If you're too much a tough contractor, pressing all creativity out of the architect, the engineer, they think as we do actually. So it's more technical people, but it's the architect. Then we have a problem, and I would say it's not the idea, but it is a risk. I agree. But it's also a risk when we on a traditional project we made a bid on, and we had the lowest price, but all prices was much over budget, was invited to a crisis meeting where we had 2 days to come up with some proposals how to save millions of kroner, because all the consultants, they were so proud. And we came in a meeting room. There were very young people, engineers and architects, very proud of their project. The problem was that the client didn't have the money. And we had just measured and calculated every drawing on this detailed project. And we came into the room, and no one of the consultants said that, yeah, we can see maybe we made it too ambitious and so on. Everyone was proud of his project, and somehow it was the contractor's fault. But how can it be our fault? We had a price competition. We delivered the lowest price. We calculated all the drawings and descriptions. And what could the consultants do afterwards? They used 1 year more to change the project. And I think the consultants also suffered financially there, because they didn't get any new payments. And then maybe we could start to think about, couldn't we make a cocktail where this way of working is more successful for all of us? I believe so.
Any other comments? Then I have one. Hans, I'm very interested in the pendulum you talked about. It seems like all of these concepts, if it's IPD or partnering or lean construction, for that sake, is quite vulnerable for one failed project, and then we leave it. And then there's a couple of years where we don't have the nerve to do it again, and then hopefully we'll go back to it. But if you talk to people in the whole business, people, both clients are still saying that partnering was a good idea. Consultants are saying that it's a good idea. You're saying that it's a good idea. I don't know if politicians do it as well, but if you talk to people, we can all agree that it's a good idea. And in here, we certainly agree that it's a good idea, and everyone can profit by using it. Why is it so vulnerable, and how can we avoid? How can we make sure it's not that vulnerable in the future?
I don't have the full answer, I'm sure, because this is very complex. I think after a while, when you have talked about a certain way of working concept, then sometimes it happens that now we want to change, try something new. Maybe the contractors, they have been too successful, or others, so we will go for new methods sometimes. And that's why I know it's a provocation equivocation here when I say that it's all talking about the concept names. It's all the same. It's not totally. It's very much about it's the same, but not totally the same. But sometimes new names comes up and so on, and I think I don't mind. I call it partnering, but other names are fine also. Sometimes the market situation, I think, is so. When we had the financial crisis, we could see the clients started to go more for the traditional one. They want to somehow get some low prices on tenders. And that's also fair, but then it creates some of the other more negative sides. And I would say, depending on how your price has been put together and your agreement, if the contractor in the most contracts we work in buy cheaper, then the savings go into the project. But it also depends. Sometimes phase 1 is open book and phase 2 is more fixed price and so on, so it also varies. But maybe we could pass the question also to the audience, and they might have ideas where if we all somehow believe in this way of working, why isn't it used then at least 50% of the time in each of the countries we come from?
I don't know if that was what you were going to answer, David, but you had a comment?
Okay, so we originally thought of partnering as a process that was established largely from a behavioral approach, as everybody's. I don't want to taint it by using the kumbaya kind of thing, but everybody getting together and cooperating, and now in essence, what we think of as their best effort for collaboration. The major departure that I think lean construction and integrated project delivery brought was a focus on, I like to think of it in processes. Glenn Ballard would and does correct me always. He thinks of it as the operating system, right? So like we were talking about a 3 legs commercial operating system organization, but so it seems to me that what you're doing is taking the originally behavioral-based partnering and the good parts of that you found, and bringing the operating focus of operating system on it by using Last Planner, using big room concept, bringing processes to play, right? To blend them, and in that sense, it doesn't really matter what you call it. And to that point, there was just a study made by the University of Boulder. One of the press releases that I was talking about that is now turning to a more positive perspective about IPD. Happen to be talking about IPD, but the result of that study that's just coming out in print now, just soon, is a conclusion that no matter what delivery method you're using, there is an advantage to the project by including as many project participants as early as possible. Yeah, right? So, and you can't always include all project participants, and that, now you're back to including the right people and the right conversations at the right level of detail at the right time. So it just seems to me that this really speaks back to the difficulty of getting the architect engaged and their head in the game. They come, there's a different culture there, and they have initial different value proposition. That is, their design is their design of, they worked so hard on it, and they're smart people and creative, and if it's done independently from the team that's delivering the project, then I don't care how open you are, you're automatically defensive about it, even if you resist it. So this idea of early involvement as project participants is really sort of the leveling factor, I think. Yes?
So I just want to make a quick comment. There's actually a paper from 2012. I will pronounce the name wrong. It's Peretti Ladenperä. It's a Finnish guy. And he wrote a paper about making sense of the multi-party contractor arrangement of project partnering, project alliancing, and integrated project delivery. And he's really comparing these three things pretty good. So if somebody's interested, there's a paper.
Maybe I was not totally clear about that, but I agree with in spite of you, somehow partnering discussion started with very much on focus on the client's needs, where lean construction started, you could say, about the operations on site. But what I tried to explain was that this mindset we created in the early phase together with the architects and engineers and clients, and working with open books and discussing processes and so on, that's what we have tried to carry on together with the foremen and workmen and so on to improve their processes. So in that sense, you could say that it's for us, it's a conceptual follow-up on the start with the connection to the client. But that's also important somehow to answer Sten's question, because he always asked me about how do you bring in subcontractors, and it is important. But when you are brought in the subcontractors, then you will have the next question: how do you bring in the workers? And that was why we somehow made a total umbrella within the partnering mindset, how to carry the whole project out within openness and common goals and so on, and workshops and teamwork and improving team spirit the whole way through.
I think it's important that we recognize your opportunity to experiment with scalability here, because we often talk about this in terms of whatever it is we're doing. You create a big room which includes. The point is to include all the project participants as early as possible, right? We're in agreement that that's a good thing, right? But how do you, and we're often told, well, that's great on a $2 billion hospital, you have plenty of budget, and how you do it on a $1 million project or $5 million project or even a $500,000 project. And this idea of scalability and showing results of different approaches and evaluating that data over time to see what things worked for you, what things didn't work for you. We tend to shy away from, in the concept of co-location and big room, we tend to shy away from virtual co-location as much as possible, because it's the human interaction between two players that's really the issue. It's very difficult to get body language reaction from people over a conference call, right? That's tough. But sometimes you're doing a $500,000 project or even a $250,000 project, and co-location, quote unquote, might be a phone call every day or every week, but inside a process kind of thing. So I'm going to be interested in your progress over time, addressing that and having you come back and share that with us.
Before your answer, we've got Alan and Sven, and you'll be the two last questioners. Can you say that? And after that, you will have the chance to round off. So if you can just gather the questions and then round off at the end. Then Alan, it's your turn now.
Can I answer David's question?
At the end.
Okay. No, you have to ask your question.
No, it's a change of subject, so it makes sense for you to respond to David.
All you need to say is, okay. It's really a comment rather than a question.
I would say that was exactly what you're pointing at. The scalability was one of the big challenges when I came back from the US, because I had only been involved in these very large projects and I didn't see any of those in Sweden. So we first faced on these larger projects. I know that's small in the in a US context, but in Sweden it was large projects. But we constantly were asked, okay, so what is the smallest project that you can apply this concept onto? And we actually tested it down to a one family house. So it would be like a $1 million project.
Yeah, that's quite a house. $1 million project? $1 million house?
Yeah.
Two-family house.
Yeah. It depends. In Stockholm, you can sell a house for $1 million. So, say again? Yeah, okay, but it depends. But if you create a house today and you build it in either Stockholm or Gothenburg, it goes for around, I don't know. It's not so important. We're talking about a one-family house, and that's a lot less than a big hospital in San Francisco. So now we're talking about scalability, and we saw again that the method about how we do with, I should say, the human interaction, that when you have people together that talk together, they solve problems that would not be solved if they are not talking together. So we have to facilitate the informal communication, and that's basically what it's about. And that's some of the challenges we have had. This particular project that I'm talking about, it was a success to some extent. But we have other challenges, and that's often what makes it difficult, because what is what causes what, and so on. But I think that we came to the conclusion that the method itself is not limited to any economical size of the project. Then the thing is, how do we then physically handle it? Because if we have to, in this case, build this house, we for some reason decided to take consultants from all over Sweden. And I know, again, according to American standard, Sweden is not big, but it is. It's like 20 hours car ride from south to north. So if you take consultants from the very north and the very south, it's very difficult to co-locate them on a weekly basis. So what we did was that we only co-located them because we wanted them physically to be together. So we co-located them for every 3 weeks. We wanted them really to sit together, and the rest of the time we made it a virtual space where they could come together. And therefore I can say that it worked, because due to the effect of being together every 3 weeks, they knew each other better, so they could ask some of these questions even by phone that you usually might not would ask. So I think that the answer to your question is that there is no size limitations other than you have to facilitate the informal communication in a way. That's basically what it's about. I see.
Yep, Alan?
Completely different point from the one I was going to make later. There is a project just up the road from Glenn and David, which co-located every other week, and it was a $350 million hospital.
That would be a rather big project in Sweden. So
Sven, last
you, Alan.
last comment, Sven.
Yeah, thank you. I was speculating while Hans spoke about how to bring in subcontractors and how to bring in architects and engineers. And I sat back with the question, how do you bring in your own middle management in this process? I've seen partnering executed, and I participated, by the way, in the Danish broadcast disaster, if you call it that. I consider it more or less as a success, but that's another, as a two-big discussion, but to quote Greg. But I say the key problem, in my opinion, is the companies on the top level, as we today, can easily agree that partnering is a great idea. We are going home and doing it, and then comes the everyday hard work. And how do we bring in our own employees in that process and get them to cooperate? And my feeling after a number of years as executive in a larger engineering company and as a consultant is that partnering has to grow, and it's growing starts from beneath, from the bottom. So it's a matter of getting the foreman on the side to cooperate before you get the companies to cooperate. So you have to rethink this process. It's not a top-down, it is a bottom-up situation we have to establish. Thank you.
A last comment from you, and then we finish off.
Yeah. Thank you, Sven. You also every time good for a nasty question. I think it's both, actually, and that was what I tried to describe. If you don't have the support from the top management and down, and the top management somehow makes it legal to work in new methods, and also supports, as I mentioned, we have everything described in our ISO 9001 processes, things like that. Cannot come from the bottom, but so top down is necessary. But we also, all of us, like projects where some initiative has been taken by the project people. We can use that also. Sometimes the action comes because of a client. Who has some wishes to the process we hardly knew about on the management side before we signed the contract almost. So this initiative can come from many places, but I think it's up to all parties to secure that you can actually operate in this way of working. If one party is not delivering, then it spoils the trust, and you start to have bad projects.
No, I mean, I think a lot has already been said. A final comment to this whole discussion regarding scalability and the problems that we are facing with transferring some of these ideas from the US to us. We have talked about the tendering, that is something that we really have to solve, because that is a problem for us, and the physical facilitations of this is also a problem. And I don't see that the scalability is a problem, because that is how it is, and we can handle that. But what comes as a side effect to the scalability is that all these contractors that we take in to participate in those hybrid co-location where they only co-located for 1 day, is that they also have to fit into their own organization at the same time that they are in a project studio. So how do you facilitate that? You both have these project studios, and those that are there, they also have to fit into their own organizations at home. That is one of the challenges that we have right now, to handle how we have peoples engaged in more projects and how they fit in. Yeah. So I cannot give you any answers to that. I can just say that that's a challenge that we have. That is not something that I, for example, saw when I was in the US, because people were co-located for 2 years and were engaged every day during the week, so they did not have these problems. I don't know if you can call them problems, but at least challenges. I mean, they're exciting challenges. So they're not anyone that will. It's not a challenge that will stop us from doing it, or that will in that way. But it's just something that we have to figure out. How do we do this? Because this is a new way of working, so it doesn't fit in the traditional way of working in construction today that people are taking out of a context and put into another. So yeah, we have to work on it, basically.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a big hand.